Support for Carolina Business Review provided by Grant Thornton. Operating in more than 100 countries, our tax, audit, and advisory professionals specialize in helping companies unlock their growth potential. Blue Cross and Blue Shield of South Carolina, where healthcare is changing for the better. Find out how at ahealthysc.tv. And by Sunoco, a global manufacturer of consumer and industrial packaging products and provider of packaging services, with more than 300 operations in 35 countries.
Innovation, it sounds more like a college course than a business strategy. We throw that term around in dialogues as being important initiatives and concepts to make our own for a healthy and prosperous future. But like so many lofty-sounding platitudes, how does innovation affect our here and now? And what would it look like if we got it right? And where does innovation fit into the priority pecking order of harder critical needs like education, like healthcare, like tax reform, infrastructure, joblessness? Welcome again, and this is the most widely watched source for Carolina business and public policy. I'm Chris William, and as we try to do each week, we enjoin the discussion with leaders in their field and those with opinions worth listening to. And we will do it again. Please stay with us.
Major funding also by Novant Health, bringing you world-class technology, clinicians, and care when and where you need it. The Duke Endowment, a private foundation enriching communities in the Carolinas through higher education, healthcare, rural churches, and children's services. And by Blue Cross and Blue Shield of North Carolina. Who's responsible for rising healthcare costs? Join us and many others in a candid discussion at letstalkcost.com. This edition of Carolina Business Review was recorded March 28, 2014. On this week's program, Dr. Dirk Brown of the University of South Carolina, Dr. John Hardin of the North Carolina Department of Commerce, Bill Mahoney of SCRA, and Dr. Michael Walden of North Carolina State University. And now, here's Chris William.
Hello, welcome to our program. Gentlemen, good to have you all back on the program. Nice to see you again, Michael, after many years. It's good to have you
Older
here.
and grayer, but
Still
maybe
a little bit thinner, more attractive.
Thank you.
If that helps. Jim Clifton is the CEO of the Gallup poll. For many years, he's been at the top of this internationally renowned polling organization. And Jim Clifton was speaking to a group of business leaders at a North Carolina Chamber 2030, Vision 2030 at the end of last year. And CEO Clifton said something that was really telling. And he said, if North Carolina, and I'm speaking for South Carolina as well, but he said, if the Carolinas are going to get this right, and he was talking about, home growing innovation, he said, you got to do two things. You've got to attract innovators. And he said, let me go even farther than that. He said, innovation and entrepreneurialism, we use them interchangeably, but they're two distinct things, and rarely do you have an innovator who's also an entrepreneur. Bill, I'm going to start with you because this seems to be closest to you, and at least. Number one, do you agree with that? But number two, help us understand this innovation and then entrepreneurialism.
Well, okay, I think, in SCRA's investment practice through the SC Launch program and now the Stage 2 program, we kind of divide those up just as the Gallup executive did. The innovation really is typically a technological change or a methodological change that has some enabling types of outcomes. The entrepreneur is typically the human being who connects that enablement to a new market need. Mm-hmm. And very often when we're doing due diligence for investments in our SC Launch companies, we're checking out the technology or the methodology, but we're also checking out the people. And without the two of those together, you're probably not going to have a high return on that investment. Very often you see it in partners, one of whom will be the business founder and the other will be the technical founder. And a lot of times when you have those marriages together, you got a much higher capability for success and a positive exit out of those types of investments. It's really two sides of the equation, but one is really the capability, and then the other is connecting it to a need that changes either the economics or the outcomes for the benefit of most people.
So how important would just to get this right, this innovation / entrepreneurialism?
Well, it's absolutely crucial. And again, I think another way of saying this, innovation is the guy out in the lab dreaming up the new process, new technology. The entrepreneur is the one who sees, is there a place for it in the marketplace? Can you make a profit on it? You clearly need both people. And clearly this importance of innovation is crucial, absolutely crucial to moving our economy ahead. If you look in economic history, standards of living in the world didn't really start to change until we got the first industrial revolution. So to move forward, we have to constantly have innovation. We have to constantly have new inventions, new technologies that move us forward. I think the big challenge, though, especially with the kind of innovations coming through now, are they job creating? And some of them are job destroying. So that's going to be a challenge, I think, for policymakers, in particular in the future of, as we move ahead and we have technology and machines that can take the place of people, where are we going to employ those people?
But Dirk, you've got innovation in the title of the Faber Center down at USC. So, I mean, isn't good innovation really disruptive?
Well, that's a loaded question, so let me answer it a different way. But it's
You're not sidestepping this question, are you, Dr. Brown?
let me circle back to it if you don't mind. So one interesting, I like the split between innovation and entrepreneurialism, and I'll tell you why. I think there's a step even before that, which is called invention. And so oftentimes you have an invention, it becomes, John Wolpert, who is a friend of mine, works at IBM, IBM executive with the interesting title of Seeker of Awesomeness. IBM's starting to give out these titles that are
more Apple-like than they are IBM, right?
Right. Yeah. But he talks about innovation as being invention plus intention. So you have someone who invents something in a lab. You have a pen in your hand, so you invent this thing called a pen. You can write with it. You can stab somebody with it. So what you're going to do with the pen is actually part of the innovation. And then entrepreneurialism, in my mind, is largely execution. You need to go execute that innovation in the marketplace and make it a commercially viable enterprise. It's more exciting, I think, when those innovations are disruptive. You have entrepreneurialism on innovations that are not so disruptive. They tend to be the slow growth, blocking and tackling types of businesses. But the disruptive innovations lead to opportunities for these high impact firms that create a lot of the wealth and the jobs in the United States. And that's why we get excited about disruptive innovation, because, as you know, less than 3% of the companies in the U.S. create more than 2/3 of the jobs. And those are the ones that are taking these innovations, driving them into the marketplace, and creating a lot of value very fast.
So how do you, John? You live in the Triangle. You're within a stone's throw of the General Assembly. I mean, how do you make these sexy issues for the General Assembly to say, okay, we're actually going to work, we're actually going to act on this because we will see an ROI in a year or 5 or 10?
Right. If you in terms of communicating with policymakers, most policymakers are generalists. They're not technology experts. So you have to explain things in terms they can understand. So let me give you an example of how we did that. I had to present to a legislative committee a couple of years ago and tell them about the things we do in the Office of Science and Technology and how we support all these companies. And what I did was I brought one of those companies that we had supported, and it's a company that works with nanotechnology. And nanotechnology is not easy to understand. But what the company representative did was he brought a fishing pole, and a fishing pole that he had enhanced with nanotechnology to make the pole lighter and stronger and actually ultimately cheaper. And he passed that fishing pole around to the legislators, and all these guys fish, and they looked at it, and they still may not know exactly what nanotechnology is, but they understand that nanotechnology, something that sounds pretty complicated, actually helps something that they can do. And so if you can at least get their attention with that, that allows you to then go to the next step and talk about what it takes to bring that about.
Right. So this is to anyone here. Were you going to say something, Bill?
Well, I just think the other part of the equation is return on investment, because typically the technology companies will have higher per capita wages. They'll spawn more ancillary service jobs in the greater community than a retail service type of job. So I think it's incumbent upon all of us who are involved in the innovation, entrepreneurial, that value chain, to make sure that we keep track of company formation, job creation, per capita wages, private capital added to public capital, if that's the mix that you're dealing with in your particular region. Those are all, in addition to the living, breathing example of a product that is made better by a new technology, the economic outcomes of deploying those technologies successfully have to be uppermost and in front of everybody.
And that's an area where actually economists can be helpful, hopefully, in that when you do have a company that's successfully created, spun off, not just to look at the jobs at that company, but to look at the supply chain and look at the impact on consumer spending as consumers and workers spend those wages, to look at the totality of jobs that are created beyond just the company, the walls of the company.
So, Michael, when you I hear you all, and I'm nodding my head in agreement, and you sold me. You sold me. You had me at hello. But Michael, it doesn't seem to be a burning platform. So why is the General Assembly going to change policy, going to fund it differently, other than you all out there having to do these road shows or speaking to individual legislators?
Well, I think in North Carolina we are having this debate about how do we generate economic development, and you've been following that, and the choice has been made to push more of that into a private sector company, sort of quasi-public, quasi-private, based on the viewpoint that has been successful in other areas. I don't see our state government and the administration, the McCrory administration, backing away from encouraging economic development and encouraging innovation or encouraging entrepreneurship. I think it's a different philosophy of what's the most effective way to do that.
Right.
So, John, you're in effect a government employee. You're certainly related. John Lasseter was on this program, chairs the Economic Development Group that is overarching the new Department of Commerce Public-Private Partnership, and Chairman Lasseter on this program 2 weeks ago said that we need to start thinking at the university level and changing the incentive compensation for tenured professors that are, instead of being published and more known for their research, to be actually putting stakes in the ground and turning out innovation, patents, and some kind of tech transfer, substance. How does your office come down on that? How do you think about that personally?
Yeah, no, I would agree. I would not argue that all professors need to move away from publishing and to company creation. It varies by academic discipline. Some can do it well, some can't. And in order to have the company creation, you have to have the early stage publication and research. So it shouldn't be a wholesale change, but I think there can be a greater proportion of that activity than is occurring now, and it can be incentivized. But it's not just, you can't solve the problem or the challenge simply in North Carolina, because academia is a worldwide phenomenon, and they have publishing standards and norms throughout the disciplines. And so it's a bit of a collective action problem. If NC State does it, but other universities don't, then are the NC State faculty incentivized in a way that all other faculty are not, and are not recognized other places? And so it's occurring, but slowly.
Could Harris Pastides do that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's happening across. I think we're slowly trending across the board towards this direction of.
You mean really, in the industry, in the academic industry, or at USC?
In academia in general, I would say. And so one of the folks I work closely with is Tony Ambler, Dean of the College of Engineering at University of South Carolina, and he has a very specific plan to really remove what today is a penalty. If you have an academician who wants to spin off innovations and start a company, and they're not at Stanford or MIT, it's actually penalizes them in their academic career today. And I think what has to happen is academia writ large has to understand that this is an important contribution that professors can make towards innovation and commercialization of innovations, and allow a university professor's career not to be negatively impacted by spending time on commercializing innovation as opposed to writing esoteric academic papers, which are important as well. But,
as one in that industry, that's really the key of how professors get evaluated and how they move up the chain. I might say at NC State, just to tout NC State's horn, we developed a center, if you will, a centennial campus, a campus all around this idea, 20 years ago, 25 years ago, of bringing academics and people in the industry together. And I think it's been phenomenally successful. I tell people about the really exciting things that are going on at our textile college. People say, textiles, that's dead. Oh, it is not dead. They are swimming in money. They are doing some extremely far-reaching things there.
And a lot of collaboration with industry.
I don't know if you'd agree with me, but I've seen over the last 5 years a dramatic acceleration in the direction that we're talking about. It's really exciting if you're in academia. And University of South Carolina just initiated a new organization called the Office of Economic Engagement, reports directly to President Harris Pastides, run by Bill Kirkland. And its primary objective is to facilitate what we're talking about, which is to, in some ways, make academia more relevant, get the professors out of their ivory towers, and help them to drive inventions into innovations into commercialized entrepreneurial ventures.
I just have to find a way to ensure and patent that GDP rises every quarter, and then I'm set.
Yeah, figure that. You give that formula out. We're going to come back to you in a second. Next week on this program, she is the relatively new mayor for the capital city in North Carolina. Mayor Nancy McFarland will be here. Among everything else that's going on in Raleigh, about the downtown development, about some of this critical mass that Raleigh's been able to get some real momentum going in business as well as government and everything related. Bill, I want to come back to you on something. You know, and I asked Michael this a second ago. You know, if innovation is one of these ambiguous kind of concepts to get your head around if you're not in the system, how do you, I mean, how competitively punitive is it if we don't get innovation right? Where do we start seeing, you know, South Carolina is just not competitive, North Carolina is not going to make the cut? How does that happen? Or does it happen? Or is it more a little insidious than that?
Well, I think the way that you discover whether there's a growth or decline in innovation in a particular state, a lot of states measure the number of patents filed, and there's a lot of data that you can work on it, and our state does it too. But I really think what you're looking at primarily is company formation, job creation, investment, total investment in those companies, because if the companies are innovative, they'll find money. And more money will most likely find them. It's more like that. And I also think that a record that we keep at SCRA is how many of those companies that are in our SC launch and stage 2 programs actually have licensed intellectual property from the in-state universities. Since 2006, we've been able to form or land in South Carolina over 290 startups. Over a third of those have either a licensing or affiliation with the university. Of the 3 research universities in the state, and that's a very high density compared to other benchmarks that we've seen around the country. And then, as you look at the top 60 of our portfolio companies, we've invested about $18 million directly in those companies. They have now dragged over $260 million of add-on private capital into them. And the other, we're talking in the green room about Doug Woodward of the University of South Carolina, does a lot of our economic studies. We're not solely responsible for this, but since the Great Recession, professional, scientific, and technical jobs in those federal classifications have actually grown by 7% in South Carolina. So you can't really line up a specific cause and effect, but if that type of outcome in jobs is occurring for the state of South Carolina, we're doing a pretty good job upstream of that, of getting innovations out of the lab and off the bench and into the marketplace.
Michael, let's say we got this right, or North Carolina got it right. They got innovation. You got buy-in from the General Assembly. You got companies really getting some momentum. How much could it add to top line gross state product?
Hard to put a number on that, but I think
1%, 10%.
Oh, I think probably more like 5%. I think, quite frankly, the problem in North Carolina and somewhat South Carolina also is to make sure that we just don't concentrate those innovative companies in the metro areas, that we move out to the rural areas. Bill and I were talking about that in the green room. I think that's really where some of the severe economic problems are in both states.
Yeah. John, I want to bring something in here. An executive summary from the North Carolina Department of Commerce signed by Secretary Decker, who has, of course, been on this program talking about it. And one of the findings around economic well-being, and I'm sorry to look down, forgive my rudeness here. It says North Carolina has one of the fastest growing populations in the nation, but the productive capacity of its economy is below average. How does that square?
Right. Well, North Carolina is an attractive place in terms of quality of life. We have a low cost of living, we have a great environment, but we're also, that's one reason we're growing so quickly. But the opportunities for innovative growth are not as great as they could or should be. And so in order to have innovative growth, you have to have the right type of workforce, you have to have the right type of support for the economy. And we have a lot of the raw pieces in place in terms of the great R&D in our universities, but the percentage of our employment that is in high-tech industries is below average. The percentage of our economy that's high-tech industries is below average. And so there's a bit of a paradox there. And so I think what we need to do is, for the people who are here, we need to make sure that they are sufficiently well-trained and they are sufficiently good, high-tech, innovative opportunities for them to fill those positions.
So you're nodding over there, Dirk. What do we need to be doing now to make sure we attract this exact demographic?
Yeah, it's a critical mass issue,
Yeah,
right? And so we're
right.
trying to build critical mass of talent, access to capital, ecosystem infrastructure, so you know,
Culture?
supply chain.
Cool culture?
I would argue that the culture, they're interrelated. So the culture breeds this type of access to resources, and the access to resources in turn breeds the culture. One major item that that has come up in both the Carolinas, I think, is customer base. So early stage new ventures need what we call anchor customers, so early adopter customers. And one thing I think that would really help in the Carolinas is to get the large organizations that are already in the states, headquartered in the states, to step up and help to be customers, early adopter customers of some of these new ventures. And that's where these clusters form, these industry clusters of companies that are doing similar types of things. That if you look at places like Silicon Valley, New York, Austin, Texas, Israel, what you find is clusters of these companies that are feeding each other, those small ones building up because they're supporting the larger ones. And I think that's, if we have those types of anchor customers in the state with a good talent pool coming in and access to venture capital or the types of capital that will help these growing fast growth companies, I think that we'll continue to see this dramatic acceleration that has already started, actually. I mean, we always look at data 5 years ago.
Yeah,
I think
sure.
5 years from now, we'll see that we're doing some great stuff already in the Carolinas.
Yeah.
Bill, I know this is squarely in kind of your wheelhouse.
Well, it is. I mean, our SCRA's basic operation is taking prototypes and discoveries out of labs and off of benches and getting them into the marketplace. And we do that under contract to both the federal government and about 350 corporations now from around the world. What's interesting is we're being asked by some of the anchor corporations in South Carolina, BMW with the methane to hydrogen program, for example, to help them make their R&D dollar go further. And corporations can't afford to do all the in-house R&D that they need anymore on their own. So they're looking for a low-cost, high-efficiency, strong track record outsourcer like us to come and help them. So I'm very confident that over the next several years, and we built a portion of our plan around this, that we'll be operating accelerators in partnership with some of the anchor corporations, not only in South Carolina, but across the region. And we'll have the unique opportunity to not only apply the good management we have of the applied R&D cycle to those accelerators, but also where promising technology comes through and it's going to form a corporation in South Carolina, we can co-invest with the anchor company in that startup. So you know, that's a business opportunity for us that I think will have, like everything we do, you know, a substantive result in the public, in growing the public mission that we have of technology-based economic development.
And Dirk mentioned talent in this whole area, which is crucial. And I think we are beginning to think about re-examining curriculum and access to careers and training that would get people in, young people into innovative technological fields faster, pushing some of this training down to the high school level. It's at the community college level, it's at the four-year college level, but even down to the high school level, there's been some interesting discussion about that. In Wake County, for example, we now have a standalone technology high school.
That would seem like, you know, this innovation would seem like it's just a sexy business anyway. Why wouldn't it draw kids to it? And we have about 20 seconds.
Well, I think the data suggests it does. You know, universities in general are putting these. The University of South Carolina, where you can now get an applied computing minor in any major. I think it's happening. What you're describing should happen is actually happening.
So again, to your point, 5 years from now, we'll say, yeah, it actually was working. Gentlemen, thank you for being on the program. I'm glad we could pull this off and you all are willing to do it. Michael, I just want to say quickly, congratulations on Order of the Longleaf Pine.
Thank you. Thank you.
Well deserved.
Thank you.
And congratulations
Appreciate
to you. Bill, good to see you, Bill.
Good to see you, Chris. Thank you.
Thank you for watching our program. Next week, Nancy McFarland from Raleigh. Until then, I'm Chris William. We hope your weekend is good. Good night.
Major funding for Carolina Business Review was provided by the Duke Endowment, a private foundation enriching communities in the Carolinas through higher education, healthcare, rural churches, and children's services. Blue Cross and Blue Shield of North Carolina. Who's responsible for rising healthcare costs? Join us and many others in a candid discussion at letstalkcost.com. Grant Thornton. Operating in more than 100 countries, our tax, audit, and advisory professionals specialize in helping companies unlock their growth potential. Novant Health, bringing you world-class technology, clinicians, and care, when and where you need it. Sunoco, a global manufacturer of consumer and industrial packaging products and provider of packaging services, with more than 300 operations in 35 countries. Blue Cross and Blue Shield of South Carolina, where healthcare is changing for the better. Find out how at ahealthysc.tv. And by viewers like you. Thank you. Promotional consideration provided by Business North Carolina Magazine. For more information, visit carolinabusinessreview.com.